everybody was telling me that I was more than an athlete. My family members told me I was more than an athlete. I'm not going to sit here and say my family didn't, because they did. My teachers, my coaches, the one thing that they didn't do was they didn't tell me why, right? And for years I resented them. I was like, man, why did my family? And they couldn't, right? Like, I can't blame my family for, and my coaches or my educators for something that they didn't have, right? Sometimes we want things from, teachers want things from their students that their students don't currently possess, right? So they're committing insanity. Sometimes we, as entrepreneurs or just leaders, we want things from people when they don't have it. So my coaches, my family members, my friends, they didn't have the understanding of who I was outside of my sport. Because quite frankly, they all they knew was Jeremiah, who played this sport. However, their intent was in the right place because they knew I was more. They just didn't necessarily understand how to help me understand why I was more.
Welcome to the Mindset on Resilience podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Truelove, and I am excited for the guest that we have here today. Man, he's someone that everybody needs to know. If you're an educator, administrator, student, heck, if you're somebody that is looking to take the lead in your life, to be able to go to the next level, this is the man that you need to be connected to. He's a husband. He's an author. He's a former NFL veteran, played in the league, but also transitioned into education, worked in there for 10 years, and has been, for the last 10 years, been working in education, speaking all across the globe, speaking to colleges, speaking to schools, speaking to everybody. Listen, let me just tell you, this man is phenomenal, and I'm excited that we get an opportunity to be able to learn from his journey. Because as you know, as you make transitions in life, transitions don't happen easily. And so we're going to learn how he was able to overcome all of that. So none other than my man, the most amazing Jeremiah Brown. How you doing, big time?
Man, I appreciate you, man. I'm excited to be here. It's been a busy past couple of weeks traveling for engagements, but we made it work. So, and I'm really really honored to be on your platform, man.
That's good. I noticed that you were last two. I saw you at Kentucky, but then Super Bowl. My man was at the Super Bowl. Talk to me. Talk to me about the Super Bowl, man.
Man, it was incredible. It was definitely an opportunity for me to, serve on one of the largest platforms, I've ever served on. Speaking to universities all over the country, educational conferences, leadership conferences, speaking at the Super Bowl as a former athlete. But it was almost like a little flex. I'm not gonna lie to you, it was a little flex. Going from working for the NFL and then the NFL being like a client, right? Like, it was just one of those moments where it was just like a full circle moment, being able to serve just in front of NFL execs, former and current NFL players. Man, it was incredible. And something that we're looking to do annually. So I'm excited.
Man, that's amazing. The one thing that I think is amazing. So I didn't play at the NFL, but I did get an opportunity to play college football, and I know the transition from college sports to, as I say, man, life after sports wasn't an easy one for me. So I was like trying to figure out like what's next and not knowing exactly what it is that I'm going to do. And so I can imagine not only playing at college, but then playing at the highest level. Then you transition, but then down that road, you find yourself back in a place to where you are speaking to those individuals that were either currently in a position that you are at, or in the same position that you are as a veteran, and like now you see your identity that was so tied up into being an athlete. You're no longer an athlete anymore, but you're still operating at a high level, man. How did that specifically feel?
I'll be honest with you. That was my rock bottom moment. That was the moment for me. That was probably the hardest thing I've ever experienced. Where therapy, many years later, what therapy taught me was when I was experiencing adversity at 20, 21, 22, of like not knowing who I was outside of my sport, it wasn't the 22-year-old that was showing up. It was the little 5-year-old black boy that experienced this trauma and only saw himself doing one or two things, and the two options I had or that were presented to me were, you either going to play a sport and that sport is going to get your family out the hood, or you're going to, pick up some drugs, or, start scamming or start doing some illegal activities. And I knew I wasn't built for the legal stuff, so I'm 23 years old, you know, in a completely new arena. I had all the confidence, I had that dog in me, as people would say, in my sport, but now I'm no longer in an arena with 30,000 people cheering me on and, playing against the Tom Brady's of the world. I'm now in a new arena where it's millions of people, who aren't cheering me on, who are trying to figure out, when am I going back to play football, or, what am I going to do next? And, I think everyone's intent was in the right place, family members, coaches, friends, but no one had the information I needed, and I found myself in isolation. I found myself trying to grow in isolation and, trying to just figure out who is Jeremiah Brown outside of this football player, So in this new arena, my confidence wasn't the same. That dog that I had in me as a football player wasn't the same. I thought that everybody was against me because as an elite athlete, you trying to come from my spot, and being in this new space, I didn't understand what competition meant. Um, and through therapy, through coaching, I'm on the other side of that now. But it's been about a 12-year journey to get to this side for sure.
Man, I appreciate you for sharing, because that's unfortunately that's the story for a lot of individuals that play sports, to where they think that we have limited opportunities when it comes to success, and being able to find, let's be honest, sports is a high. Now it's not a drug or anything like that, but in a way, it's like it's that rush, that thrill that you get from sports, and people cheering your name, and the fame, all the different types of things that come with that. But more so anything, the identity that's connected to the sport of football. A lot of us, we are what we put on the field, and so that's why some individuals can, they have a great game and everything is great, but if somebody scores a winning touchdown on you, or you didn't get the block that they got the sack, and now y'all lost the game. Like, there's so many emotions, highs and lows, that go with the game, because what it's all dependent upon who you are on the field, and people put their identity into that. Would you say that your identity uh, was connected to the athlete, and how did you kind of like formulate this new identity that Jeremiah Brown is somebody without a helmet, without any pads? You are who you are on the field. Like, that's the person that's what made you successful as an athlete. And that same person that had those, whether it's values, characteristics, whatever it may be, you can transition those things into anything else that you desire to do.
And that's a great perspective and point, and in short, yes, I tied my entire identity to my sport. I fell in love with the process. I fell in love with the grind and just everything that was a part of being a football player, to the point where everyone talks about these transferable skills that sports develop, but they don't talk about the transferable skills that it develops that you don't want to transfer over, right? And this need to be being affirmed by people, it was something that took me many years to grow out of, and it was the need for people to, hey, congratulations, Jeremiah, oh man, you're doing a great job, Jeremiah. Like, I thirsted for that, and it was rooted in the athlete, right? Scoring a touchdown, everybody hitting you, putting, hitting your helmet, or smacking you on the back, or signing autographs. It was just that thirst for, and most athletes, to be honest with you, we thirst for that affirmation. We thirst for, like, it's that's the high, that's the the addiction of people telling you how proud they are of you and how great you are. And when I wasn't in an arena where people were doing that, I thought I was a failure. I thought that I wasn't good enough. So as opposed to me living in affirmation, I was seeking it. I was trying to put myself in these situations, and social media didn't make it any easier, where I would do things simply because I wanted people to just tell me how proud they were of me. And those are the transferable skills that people don't often talk about, because those things transfer into this new space to where now, like, I wanted my confidence to transfer over, but I didn't know how. I wanted my discipline to transfer over. I wanted that dog, that competitiveness to transfer over, but I didn't know how. And here's the thing, man. Everybody was telling me that I was more than an athlete. My family members told me I was more than an athlete. I'm not going to sit here and say my family didn't, because they did. My teachers, my coaches, the one thing that they didn't do was they didn't tell me why, right? And for years I resented them. I was like, man, why did my family? And they couldn't, right? Like, I can't blame my family for, and my coaches or my educators for something that they didn't have, right? Sometimes we want things from, teachers want things from their students that their students don't currently possess, right? So they're committing insanity. Sometimes we, as entrepreneurs or just leaders, we want things from people when they don't have it. So my coaches, my family members, my friends, they didn't have the understanding of who I was outside of my sport. Because quite frankly, they all they knew was Jeremiah, who played this sport. However, their intent was in the right place because they knew I was more. They just didn't necessarily understand how to help me understand why I was more. So a lot of the work that I do now in helping, industry leaders develop their leadership identity, helping students develop their leadership identity, is getting people to understand that what you do is what you do. It's not who you are, right? And really separating between the two of those things. And I'll be honest with you, man. It was a quest to figuring out who Jeremiah Brown was. And as a result, I had to heal. I had to join communities where people aspire to do similar things like me, where, that iron sharpens iron analogy. I had to put myself in those spaces and places to help me get the clarity, and that clarity is really what positioned me to get the confidence to do what I'm doing today.
I think one of the things is that I hear that it's kind of popular now, more than the athlete. I think it's LeBron James that kind of created a business that's centered around that. But you mentioned it earlier. What happens when your language is one thing, but your behaviors are different? So let me ask you this. So they're saying, Jeremiah, you're more than an athlete, but when you transition from the NFL and now you're starting your career outside of football, why am I asking you a million questions that are about everything? I mean, but about only sports. So if you're more than an athlete, why am I asking you when you're going back to the NFL? What about when you scored your last touchdown, when you made your last tackle? What happens when our words are you're more than an athlete, but our behaviors make you believe that you're only good if you are still in the league? Tell me about that.
So that was my reality. That is the reality of most current and former NFL players, or across all sports, where everyone's telling you you're more, but the conversation is built around what you did as a former professional athlete, And for many years, I'll be honest with you, I struggled watching the game of football. I struggled telling people that I played football. Like from 2014, 15 till about like right before the pandemic, I worked with individuals for years and they didn't know I played in the NFL. Like crazy. And it was because I was on a quest towards identifying that it was almost like I had to prove to myself, not to really anyone, but to myself, that I was more. And it was through doing the work, right? Now, I was unclear of what that work was. To provide some context, I graduated college with a degree in education and sociology, right? So sociology was my major, education was my minor, but because I was there every single semester, I ended up double majoring. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. And it was just this one time, a principal, shout out to Onitha Swinton, she is literally was one of the first people that was she was a decision maker as a principal, high school principal, that didn't speak about the football player. She spoke to like the human being. And she was the very first person that was just like, Jeremiah, there's something about you that our kids need. And I don't know what it is. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know what it is, but let's try out this educational thing. And I'm gonna be very transparent with you. Like, having someone like you on my staff will help me become a better principal, right? It's gonna, because I know I'm gonna have someone that I can trust, that's gonna connect with my students, because sometimes educators forget that they serve students, not numbers. So for her having me on her staff, it was like, man, I know I'm going to have someone who I don't have to worry about the numbers, but someone who's going to build relationships with my students. And as a result, the culture of my school is going to increase. I didn't know any of what she, like, saw in me. And working in education was the first thing that gave me purpose outside of my sport. So to fully, bring it home and to answer your question, it was very difficult because people were telling me I was more, but not equipping me with the tools on why I was more. But it was that one conversation I had with a principal that I'm very, very blessed that I was in position to receive what she was sharing with me, because it really changed my life. And in many ways, being from a suicidal state, it saved my life.
Oh wow, wow. I'm grateful for that principle that that poured that into you, especially. Man, I think we all have these moments in life to where if people understand their assignment and focus in on that assignment, then there are more moments like the one that you're speaking about right now that we can fully take advantage of if we're in the moment and aware of what our responsibility is and also have the vision and foresight to see where this person is going to send them out of where they're at to where they're destined to be. And I feel like that's what I heard as you were speaking about that principle, because she sent you on this new trajectory of working in education. So tell me about that experience. Obviously, I think it was like you worked in education for a few years. So tell me a little bit about the different things that you did in education.
Man, absolutely. So shortly after that conversation with Principal Swinton, I did 10 and a half years in education. I did my first 7.5 in high school, and then I did my last 3 in junior high school. And, you know, I started off, I went from making, $28,000 every Tuesday as a strong safety in the NFL, to making $29,750 a year as a paraprofessional. Like, that's the context, behind, you know, why I say it was a suicidal state, right? To where I was like, man, I think this world would be better without me in it, because going from making that to making it annually, it was one of the most humbling experiences, but lowest experiences that I could imagine. However, it gave me purpose, and began to really help me understand that my assignment was much more than how much money I was making or how much clout I had as uh, a professional athlete per se. And so I went from a paraprofessional to a uh, special education teacher. Was a co-teacher supporting with students with learning disabilities, and then I was a high school athletic director. And then I transitioned from that role into junior high school, where I was a school administrator where I was the dean of social emotional learning and school culture. And it was really in those last 3 years, working in that junior high school where I feel like God really stretched me the most. He really equipped me with, like, the first 7 years, it was like, okay, like, this is the assignment, right? Like, this is the research. This is where you build relationships. This is where you get a better understanding of your audience. And then years like 7.5 through 10.5, 11, that's where it was like, okay, now you're at the table. Now you are a school leader. Now you are in charge of leading staff members. Now you are in charge of creating curriculums and supporting initiatives for the development of students from a mental health standpoint. You are responsible for the school culture in which families, students, staff, teachers are a part of. And that is what really, really, you know, shaped me into the servant leader that I'm in, and the work that I do today. So I don't want to go too far left, but that's essentially what all of that is, what positioned me to step out on faith and do this work full time.
Well, that's good. And I kind of want to pivot and go back and then come back because you did mention something out, and I would like to, for a moment, just break it down because just being very transparent, in 2009, you shared something that was a similar state that I was in, to where I was going to someone that was also suicidal in 2009 as well. And so, and the reason why I would like to go there, because I don't want to, like, you, for you to share that and for us not to go over a moment, because I know that it was more than just transitioning from the sport of football and making what you made, in the NFL, and to transition into that humble moment of making $29,000 or $28,000 a week to $29,000 a year. There is some other stuff that was in there that probably were very much so pivotal to the moment or the season, to where you had those thoughts. And for me, I connected my season to carrying weight. I lost my oldest sister when I was 2. I lost a brother when I was 10, and I lost another sister when I was 14. And for me, football was two things. Football was number one. It was a way for me to express my anger and frustration. So a lot of things that made me successful in football was a byproduct of me not going through therapy, was a byproduct of a family dynamic that wasn't built on, hey, we're going to talk about, what we're going through. Those weren't the, core tenets of our family dynamic. And so because those weren't core tenets, that kind of frustration led me to being successful in football. Now, years and years and years of what goes on in this house stays in this house, but what's in this house is it being talked about, led to a moment that in 2009, when the only thing that I had to where I could express my frustration, to where I could get that anger and aggression out without any, repercussions. I can't go to jail if I knock you out on the football field. Now all of that is gone, and my whole identity has been wrapped up in that, and I no longer have that and don't know exactly where I'm headed in life. All that weight was pressed on me all at one time. And so for me, that's what I've kind of, going through my own therapy moments and kind of figuring my own story out. I feel like I know that's my story. I carried this for too long, and carrying weight for a long period of time, it gets heavy. And it was just my heavy moment. So for you, I know it had to be more than just a transition from football that led to those thoughts or whatever. What was that? What was that for you?
Man, that's so good. If there's anyone on this call that is experiencing suicidal ideations, you feel like you're at your lowest, there's two things I want to equip you with. One, I want you to know that your life matters, your purpose is needed in this world, that you are the solution to a problem that exists. And if you don't know what solution to what problem, your purpose on this earth is to figure that out and to live in that, right? So we need you here. But if you feel like you're on the edge, like I've been, You can dial 988, which is a suicide prevention hotline number. And as a mental health advocate, there's just a wealth of resources that could really, really support you. So I just wanted to start there because I know that this is a difficult topic for many, and them experiencing this conversation could trigger some emotions. So as I dive into this, I just wanted to start with that. My rock bottom moment was, so I did skip a step, right? And I appreciate you for, bringing me back, because I did go from $29,000 a year a week to $29,000 a year annually, as a paraprofessional. However, my experience that was like right before that was, I went from being a strong safety for the Jacksonville Jaguars to putting on an orange apron, checking into my shift at Home Depot. One of my mentors, Deval Ellis, who's doing some incredible work. He was one of my first mentors, within that transitional space. He was from Brooklyn. He was from, he played in the NFL for a bit, so he was someone who looked like me, but also was experienced. He had experienced a lot of what I had already experienced, and he mentored me throughout me going to the NFL, and then even a part of the earlier transition. And he said something to me that really, really led to me even working at Home Depot. And he said, Jay, I know you got this money, but it's not forever money. I know you're really trying to figure out what it is you want to do. The worst thing you can do is like spend all your money. And the worst thing you can do is just be at home and be in your own pity. You need to like get out there and get a little uncomfortable. And there's two things I want you to consider. Either you're going to work for yourself or you're going to work for someone. But because you've never had a job, I want you to get a job anywhere that will hire you. And I just want you to get a feeling of what receiving a paycheck is, clocking into your shift. So the easiest, the first, I applied all over, and Home Depot was the first company that gave me an opportunity. And I'll never forget, man, this was the moment where I went in my car and I literally was trying to figure out how to purchase a gun. And the reason why I was looking to purchase a gun was because in 2013, 2012, 2013 was a very, very unique time, because it was when, put it this way, if you caught a concussion during that time period, it was very, very difficult for you to get cleared by a doctor. Here's why. Will Smith, who is one of the greatest actors of all time, just portrayed a real life individual as it pertains to CTE, which is brain injuries and the side effects of concussions in the National Football League specifically. And the NFL doctors from all over were under immense pressure because, CTE and people pulling their kids from the game. NFL was under a microscope. The sport of football is under a microscope, to the point where it made it very difficult for doctors to clear me. This one doctor, I'm not going to say which city or state. Um, I put this in my book. This one doctor, he goes, Jeremiah, you playing the game of football is like you playing a game of Russian roulette, right? And for those that don't know what a game of Russian roulette is, it is when you take a revolver, you open the chamber, you put one bullet in, you spin it, close it shut. Don't know if it's aligned to the chamber. The bullet is aligned to the chamber. You put the bullet to your head, put the gun to your head, and you pull the trigger. Um, the premise of the game is, if the bullet goes off, you lose. If the bullet doesn't go off, you can live to fight another day. And I'm a visual learner, man. So when he said that, it became very clear to me that I don't need to put on a football helmet again. That I want to be a father one day. I want to be a husband one day. I want to give back to the world. Wasn't sure how or who, or all of these things, but I knew that was a part of my future. And I found myself in Home Depot, and this little kid runs into Home Depot and he goes, Mom, 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 that's Jeremiah Brown. Jeremiah Brown, that's my hero. So I'm like, uh-oh, like, you're not talking about me. But because I did a youth skills camp in Queens, where Home Depot, Queens, New York, where Home Depot, the Home Depot I was at was, he lived in the area and he attended my skills camp. And the mom's like, "Is Jeremiah my son?" And I'm like, "Yes, ma'am." So she's thinking that I'm volunteering, right? Because I'm this NFL guy. So I go along with it. And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm whatever." And the kid is so emotional because he's like, "Mom, like this is my hero." And he gives me a hug. So in that moment, the mom could see that my eyes began to like tear up. So the mom thinks I'm emotional because of this little black boy. But I was emotional because this little black boy had no idea that his hero didn't know who he was outside of his sport. So for me, it was like, man, like this kid, he says I'm his hero. This kid looks up to me. All I ever want to do is give back to my neighborhood and to little boys that look like me and maybe not even look like me, but just be a source of inspiration. And when this little kid said I was his hero and he had no idea that I actually worked for the company and I wasn't doing any community service, if this little black boy just knew that I was at my lowest, that I had no idea who I was the moment where I said, okay, yeah, I don't believe I belong here. And I'll never forget, you know, walking out of Home Depot that day at like 11:30 p.m. I sat in my car and I just remember just looking up, where can I find a gun? To the point where I was willing to drive down to Virginia to the Walmart because you could, in some Walmarts, you can purchase a gun. And man, that was my rock bottom moment, and I'll just never forget Inky Johnson. I heard Inky Johnson, and I just heard his story, and at the time I didn't know if I wanted to be a speaker or not, but I was like, bruh, if he went through all of that and he can no longer play the game and his experience, then I think I can. And, fast forward, I done shared the stage with Inky. Like it's just crazy, to kind of even think about it. But um, yeah, man, that was for sure, my rock bottom moment and something that even to this day gives me chills thinking about it.
Wow. Wow. And I just want to pause right here for a moment because maybe someone doesn't necessarily understand the magnitude because one of the things that you said was that the game of football is full of, searching for affirmation, the good jobs, the pat, on the back of the helmet and all that. And now you're in your next phase of life and it seems like you are receiving what would be the affirmation, hey, Jeremiah, like you're my hero. On the outside, that's what it seems like. And I caught this. I want to make sure everybody else caught this. Was the moment that made it so challenging for you is because someone else is expressing that you're their hero, and you don't even know who you are. So now you're questioning, how can I be his hero? Am I his hero because of what I did back then? And now, can I still be his hero in this next phase of my life? Am I even a hero? How can I be someone's hero and I don't know who I am? All these questions swirling around and no answers. Okay, is that kind of what led you to like saying like questioning your desire to be here?
It was really I'm so happy. I'm truly enjoying this conversation, man. You're doing an incredible job, man. So kudos to you. To be honest, man, like it was in that moment that I wasn't even emotional, that I didn't even know who I was. That was a part of it. I was more emotional to the fact that this little black boy is going to experience the same thing that I experienced, right? Like he's going to only see himself as a football player. He's going to like not listen to people who are telling him that he's more, may not even have people in his corner to tell him why he's more. And then 10 years from now, 15 years from now, he's in the same spot as me, right? Where he's feeling suicidal. And then it becomes this cycle. And I felt at that moment, I truly believe God revealed to me, he planted a seed that night. And it wasn't very clear. I'm not even going to sit here and say it was, but that bothered me. That is a part of my why. That is why I do what I do. when it gets difficult, I'm thinking about that little black boy in Home Depot that said I was his hero, right? And thinking of like, where is he today, right? Where is he right now? And have I played my part in being the solution to his problem? Because he has a problem, and his problem is he only sees himself as a football player. He can only see that playing football is going to get him and his mom out the hood. That's a problem. And he's not the only one that is having that problem. And that was the difficulty for me working in schools, because I was at Home Depot for 3 days. I'm not gonna hold you. I was there for 3 days. And then a few weeks went by, was working with my mentor, Deval Ellis, for a bit. And then that spring is when I started the spring, January of 2014 is when I started working full time in a school. Now, I started my career in education back in 2012 during my undergrad, and that was just because of internships and stuff like that. So I had some experience, but I started full time that spring of 2014, and that's when I realized that he wasn't the only little black boy. I wasn't the only little black boy. There's so many black boys, girls, white boys, Hispanic, Asian, you name it, across all genders, races, that are having the same problem. And for me, working a part of a school community, you instantly started to see that kids started to show up to school with a little bit more purpose, because Mr. Brown has a high standard for them. Mr. Brown is, exposing them to why they're more than an athlete. And I said to myself one day, like, man, if I could have this impact here, there are so many kids outside of this school building in Alabama, in Compton, in, little Haiti, Florida, like in Texas, that could benefit from what God has assigned me to do. You know what I mean? What I truly believe is my calling. And then every year as it got closer to 2022, it was like, okay, I'm one step closer. I'm one step closer. And now that I do this full time, man, I'm just very blessed that I get to travel the country and world to literally pour into leaders, um, from every level, as a result of, you know, that rock bottom moment for sure.
Yeah, man, I'm glad that we were able to, sift through that because I think it's important to, identify like what was really going on, especially when we're talking about, a subject of this matter and other people that may also be trying to sift through what it is. And for me, I recognize like knowing the right problem allows for you to find the right solution. So many people are still in the season that they're in, not because they don't have the skill set, ability, determination to get out. They just haven't identified what the real problem is. And so, therefore, they're assigning the wrong solutions and staying in the same place. And so, that's what I think is the core for a lot of people is like, what is the real issue that you're dealing with? I was working with a alternative school, and a lot of kids that look like you and I were in there. And I'll go around and I was asking them, like, why are you here? Cussing out a principal, fighting, bringing weed to school, and it's like, okay. Then I asked the question again. I said, why are you here? Like, I just told you, fighting. Said, no, 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 you don't understand. You think fighting is the reason that you're here, but you're not here because you are fighting. And because you think that's the reason why you're here, you're going to keep going down the same path and not having a solution. I said, okay. I said, so what happened? Oh, man, the teacher, said this to me, and I ain't like that. Okay, so you didn't like how the teacher spoke to you. Okay, so what do you do? So I cussed him out. I said, okay, so your problem isn't that, you cussed the teacher out. Your problem is that you believe that cussing the teacher out is okay. It's your belief system. And if you don't change the way you believe, right? So your problem is not that you got in a fight. The problem is someone disrespected you and you identify with not wanting to be a punk. And since you don't want to be a punk, you gotta what? I gotta make sure everybody knows I ain't no punk. You ain't gonna play with me. I gotta keep myself safe. So as long as your belief system is that way, as long as you continue to identify with that particular action, your behavior is not going to change. In life, we have to know the problem, the actual problem, in order for us to go down the road of what realizing that there's a different solution. And for them, I have to what deal with these unresolved anger issues that I have. Got to deal with the real root of my problem that has me coping with weed or vapes or cigarettes, whatever the case may be. Find that, and then you can find the correct solution. And that's the reason why I wanted to go down that journey with you, because I feel like so many other people um, haven't just really identified that moment, and therefore they're cycling mom, dad, kids, grandkids. It's just a cycle that needs to be broken. Man, I think this is dope, man. The fact that you've been able to now go from that moment to being one of the most inspirational individuals, man. I watch your content at times, man. Just the passion uh, in every word. And what I've heard you share over here is that you're trying to make sure, without a shadow of doubt, that even though you were an athlete, they don't see you as that. And maybe through these words that you get an opportunity to share with them, maybe they will connect with that to see themselves as more than what they are as well. So, man, can you share with me for a brief moment, man, for all the athletes that are out there that maybe they come from the hood, maybe they come from in environments where they haven't believed in anything else except for one route to get to whatever it is that they desire, whatever success is for them. What would you share for them, or how they can take the lead in their life and identify themselves as more than the sport in which they play? It's not who they are. It's just what I do. How what would you have to share with them, and how can we go through that process?
Yeah, man, I love this, man, and I was very fortunate enough. I'm very fortunate enough to do this work around the country. As an educational consultant, I literally just left the University of Kentucky a few days ago, where I led a discussion around not just helping student athletes, but students in general understand, like what their purpose in this world is, because I strongly believe that what leads to students and athletes, right? Those athletes who only see themselves as, you know, um, football players, baseball players, basketball players, and the little girl or boy whose parents are doctors or lawyers, and they're putting that on their child to be that. So now this student has this pressure of being what they've always known, and they're both experiencing the same thing. And one of the things that they're experiencing is people whose intent is the right thing asking them this question. And I believe this question is the wrong question. And we've been led to believe that as you get older, it'll become clear to what the answer to this question is. And I believe that that's false. And the question is this: what do you want to be when you get older? Like, what do you want to do? Who is it? And when you're 12, 13, 7, my son is 7 turning 8. If I ask him this question, most people would say, oh, he's too young to answer that question. Well, I know 27-year-olds, 37-year-olds, 47-year-olds who you ask that question to, they don't even have the answer to that. So in my years of doing this work, the research from the data, from the research that we've done and the data that we've compiled from, you know, K through 12 students, higher education students, professionals in corporate America, in education, the data has shown that most of them still cannot answer that question. So then it's like, well, Jeremiah, then what is so what do we need to start asking our kids? What do we need to start asking our people? Because kids that are trying to figure out who they are outside of their sport is because the question is so loaded. The question is not who you want to be, but what problems you want to solve in this world, right? Not only do we have individual problems that we are going through, you start there. So when I'm working with a student and or athlete, I'm first getting them to understand, like, you've experienced, I always in my sessions, I ask them to do a few things. I want you to write down 3 things that have happened in your life that were traumatic, right? Nobody's to judge if something is traumatic or if it's not. If it impacted you in a way that really messed you up emotionally, Let's write those three things down. Then I want you to write down three things that are happening in the world that you have a problem with, right? So let's write these three things down, and then let's try to draw a line between the two. So now what this does is it allows students to self-reflect on things that they've experienced. Because what comes of this is now students, when you think about why you do what you do, right? Daniel, when you think about like people who, if you ask them, are they living in their purpose? Those that will answer yes, it is because they are solving a specific problem. Firefighters who love what they do, it is a deep desire to solve the fires and the things that come from fires, you and all that comes within that specific lane. People who are detectives, um, police officers, sergeants, if you ask any of them who love what they do, it is because there's a problem that they are solving on a day to day. Now, okay, where did this passion come from? The passion came from them experiencing maybe a fire when they were younger, them experiencing someone having a traumatic fire that impacted their life, either internally or externally, and they made a decision that I become a firefighter, I'm going to become a part of the solution to fires and earthquakes and disasters that happen across this world. The same with educators. You ask any educator, and I know I'm speaking to you and your heart because we have the honor of serving educators around the world. Is you ask an educator why they do what they do, majority of them are going to say because someone either impacted them and that changed the trajectory of their life, or they experienced something extremely negative in education and they want to now not do that. That's trauma, personal problem, or an external problem that existed in this world. So I always start with that when I'm working with students and athletes, because what comes from that is now these students have data about themselves on not what they love to do, not what they are passionate about. At the core of who you are as a person, what drives you, what triggers your emotions to want to move. And for me, it was kids only seeing themselves as one thing. If it's a sport, if it's an extracurricular activity, getting them to understand that they are more than what they do, that they are human beings before they are students, that they are students before they are athletes, that they are sons, daughters, brothers, sisters before they are any of these things, right? So walking them through that is really, know it's a bit long-winded, but I just gave them a little worksheet, a little activity that people can do, right? um, just as it pertains to, your question of how, if you're listening to this, my recommendation to you is if you're struggling with figuring out what your purpose is, if you're 7 years old, if you're 17 years old, if you're 37 years old, 47, I want you to sit down and write down three things that have impacted you personally, three things that are happening in this world, and then answer this question. If I could pick any of those three things from both lists, and I said, who in the world means the most to you? And I had the power of inflicting this pain on that individual, would you let me? And most people will say, no, I would not let you. So I said, okay, that's where we start, because that's what's going to drive you more than the bag of money. That's what's going to drive you. You don't feel like getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's what's going to drive you to keep going. Because if you're chasing the bag, I'm here to tell you, that bag does not solve confidence. That bag does not solve, discipline. That bag does not solve all of these different things. So I know that was a lot, but that's essentially how I really, really, because here's the thing, man, and this is why my answer was what it was, is because we have, when dealing with purpose, it has to go from surface level to like internal, right? Like it's about you. It's about like what moves you, and it's not about like, because we we didn't like wake up and say, man, we just want to serve educators around this world. Like we didn't wake up and do that. Like we were assigned to do this from the experiences that we've had that led us to believe we are the solution to these problems. So, man, I could keep going and going about this, but yeah, man, that's what I would say. I would have people do that.
No, no, no. It's good because, and I want to talk about two things really quickly, and then we're gonna land this plane. But two things that you talked about is identity, and you've also speaking about purpose and how people can find the problem that they solve in the world. And one of the things that I believe that you've been expressing throughout this entire conversation on identity is who are you without your titles? So if someone was to ask, hey, describe yourself, a lot of people focus on what they do and not who they are. So I'm a teacher, I'm an administrator, I'm a football player, I'm a whatever role that you have in this world. But if you take away your roles, take away all of your titles, describe yourself then, and people have a challenge doing that particular activity because we don't go through the process of, oh, I'm a mother. Mother is a role in the title. I'm a father. Strip yourself of all those things. Who are you? I feel like at the very core, that's the foundation of finding your identity outside of any role and any title. And once your identity is set within that, now find out the problems that you solve in the world. And I have a formula that I would just like to kind of share with them because you've basically expressed my entire formula, but just in a little bit of a different way. And it's PREPS. And the PR stands for problem, the E stands for experience, the other P stands for passion, and the last S stands for solution. So Jeremiah said, find out the problems that exist in the world, that are problems that you've experienced within your life, the experiences that you have with them. So list down all the problems you want to do it, the ones you've actually had your own personal experiences with, and which one are you most passionate about solving, and which one do you actually have a solution to. And when you have a problem that you can solve and solve it effectively, then go out there and let that be the gift that you give to the world. So as you were going down through talking about what you do in your workshop, I was like, man, that's a workshop that's very similar to the one that I do as well. And that little acronym PREPS, problem, experience, passion, solution, will allow you to be able to figure out how you can live out your purpose to the fullest. Yeah. And so, man, this has been such a edifying conversation, man. I can't wait for others to be able to tap in this, for them to be able to hear this. But we end every one of our sessions on this a segment called "Better Days Ahead." And what Better Days Ahead, what it is our opportunity for anybody that's listening, um, just to for us to be able to provide them any type of encouragement. And so, do you have a mantra or a quote or anything that you live by to be able to encourage the people that are listening that there are better days ahead?
Man, there are definitely better days ahead. But if I could encourage anyone is that's out there that's watching this is stop trying to grow in isolation. And when you find yourself a part of a community of people who are doing similar work that you are doing, don't live in seeking for affirmation, but live in being your own affirmation. Because when you can do that, what it does for you, it makes it very difficult for you to compare your chapter 5 to someone else's chapter 20, because we live in a society, you live in a society where you can do something extreme, you can do something incredible and go on social media and see someone else doing something incredible, and you begin to judge your incredible experience with their incredible experience. And because they may have more likes, comments, subscribers, or whatever, you then begin to tell yourself that you aren't good enough because people aren't telling you the same way they're telling them. And I just want to, sow a seed into you, and letting you know that the better days that you seek that are ahead, um, are in your control, because you'll never be able to control what happens to you, but you'll always be able to control how you respond to it. And when you respond to it, just know that where you are, you're supposed to be there. And that is, it's okay. It's a part of your process, but to just not give up and to just keep going and to keep going, because people look at my life and they think that I've always been here. But what preceded it was the pain of making $29,000 a year. I mean, a week to $29,000 a year. The pain of being suicidal, the pain of not knowing who was looking back at me in the mirror. But all of that wasn't sent to destroy me. It was sent to develop me. So whatever you're going through, it is sent to develop you and not destroy you. And for whatever you do, don't ever compare where you are right now to where someone else is, because they just might have put more work in. But I think if you do that, not only will the better days be ahead, but they'll be consistent.
I love it. I love it. Well, Jeremiah, man, thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time. Thank you for saying, thank you for your yes and being on the podcast, man. And we end it with just what we received. Don't compare your journey to anyone else's. There are always going to be people that have this or have that or have more or have less, whatever the case may be. But whatever you're going through, it was not sent to destroy you. It was sent to develop you. Make it to the other side of that development. Keep fighting. Appreciate you so much. This is another segment of the Mindset on Resilience. I appreciate your time. Until next time.